No election was held. No referendum passed. No headline announced the decision. And yet, trillions of dollars just changed direction. Capital fled some countries overnight, flooded into others. Currencies weakened. Markets repriced risk. Nothing illegal happened. Nothing dramatic appeared on the news. Because the rule that triggered it isn't written in any constitution, and no one ever voted on it. This rule matters now because the global economy is more connected, more leveraged, and more sensitive than at any point in modern history. Money moves faster than laws. Faster than governments. Faster than public opinion. And when it moves, it decides who grows, who stagnates, and who quietly breaks. The rule is simple to describe, uncomfortable to accept. Capital flows toward safety-adjusted returns, not fairness, not democracy, not human need. Returns, adjusted for risk. That's it. This single principle quietly governs global money, and it overrides almost everything else. Let's slow it down. Imagine global capital as water. It doesn't care who deserves it. It doesn't care who needs it. It flows downhill toward the path of least resistance and highest reward. The hill isn't geography. It's policy, stability, interest rates, and credibility. Every country, whether it admits it or not, competes in this terrain. Now, here's the first uncomfortable truth. Governments don't fully control their money anymore. They manage conditions that attract or repel it. Set interest rates too low, and capital leaves. Set them too high, and growth collapses. Print too much, and credibility erodes. Print too little, and liquidity dries up. Every move is watched, priced, and reacted to in real time. This is why financial markets react faster than elections ever could. Now, let's talk mechanics. When investors decide where to place money, they don't just ask, how much will I earn? They ask, will the currency hold? Will inflation erode returns? Will capital controls trap my money? Will political instability change the rules? Those risks get priced in. If the risk rises, returns must rise to compensate. If returns don't rise, money lives. No debate required. This is the rule. And here's the part most people never hear. The rule applies equally to democracies and dictatorships, to allies and adversaries, to rich countries and poor ones. Markets don't care who wins elections. They care whether policy stays predictable, which leads to a quiet irony. A government can be popular with voters and still be punished by capital markets. Another can be unpopular domestically and still be rewarded financially. Because legitimacy in markets is different from legitimacy at the ballot box. Now zoom out. Why does this rule exist? Because global capital is mobile. It can move with a click. Labor can't. Voters can't. Governments definitely can't. So power shifts toward whatever can move. Money. And over time, this creates a feedback loop. Countries that attract capital grow faster. Growth stabilizes finances. Stability attracts more capital. Countries that lose capital weaken. Currencies fall. Inflation rises. Borrowing becomes expensive, which scares off more capital. This isn't a moral judgment. It's math. And once the loop starts, it's brutally hard to reverse. Now, let's peel back the comforting myth. You'll often hear that global money flows reflect confidence in fundamentals, productivity, innovation, hard work. Sometimes that's true. Often, it's not. Sometimes capital flows simply because other capital is already there. Momentum masquerades as wisdom. Money follows money, and the costs show up elsewhere. Rising asset prices in capital-attracting countries, higher housing costs, wider inequality. Meanwhile, capital-starved countries face austerity, currency, stress, and political instability. Same rule, different outcomes. Now here's the hidden mechanism inside the rule. Interest rate when one major economy raises rates, capital shifts globally. Not because investors love that country more, but because the math demands it. Higher rates pull money in. Lower rates push it out. This is why decisions made in a handful of central banks ripple across the world. No vote in an emerging market influences the Federal Reserve. But every Fed decision influences emerging markets. That's not imperialism in the old sense. It's structural gravity. And here's the quiet absurdity. Central bankers insist they only manage domestic conditions. Inflation. Employment. Which is true, but the side effects land globally. Capital flows obey incentives, not disclaimers. Now, contrast this with the public story. We're told globalization benefits everyone, that capital mobility increases efficiency, that markets allocate resources better than politics. Sometimes they do. But markets don't distribute pain evenly. When capital leaves a country, factories don't leave smoothly. Jobs don't reappear elsewhere. Currencies don't defulgente. The adjustmente sodon. And it's paid by people who never touched a bond market in their lives. This is where the rule becomes politically explosive, because governments are held accountable for outcomes they don't fully control. A leader campaigns on growth. Capital flees. Currency weakens. Inflation spikes. Voters blame leadership. Markets shrugged. And here's the deeper problem. To keep capital, governments shape policy around what markets tolerate. Fiscal restraint, independent central banks, investor-friendly regulation. Some of this is good governance. Some of it is survival strategy, but it narrows democratic choice. You can vote for different leaders, but the policy range stays familiar, which is why elections feel dramatic and outcomes feel repetitive. Now let's talk about the math no one campaigns on. Capital doesn't need to be permanent to be powerful. Short-term flows can destabilize entire economies. Hot money in, hot money out, booms and busts, fueled not by productivity, but by positioning. And countries learn this lesson painfully. Once burned, they self-discipline. They build reserves. They suppress volatility. They prioritize credibility over experimentation. Not because voters asked for it, because markets demand it. This is how an unelected rule becomes enforced globally. No enforcer required. Now zoom out one last time. Technology has accelerated this dynamic. Trading is faster. Information spreads instantly. Capital reacts P4. Speech is finished. The window for policy mistakes shrinks, and tolerance for deviation disappears, which creates a strange outcome. The world feels politically fragmented, but financially synchronized. Different flags, same constraints. And this is where the risk lives. When global money flows are governed by a rule no one voted on, accountability becomes fuzzy. Who's responsible? When capital leaves, who answers for currency collapse? Who explains austerity driven by market pressure? Leaders point to markets. Markets point to math. And citizens are left with the consequences. So, here's the question to sit with. If global money flows are controlled by incentives, not votes, if policy is shaped by credibility more than consent, if capital moves faster than democracy can respond, then in the long run, who actually governs the global economy? And what happens when people stop believing they have a say in a system that so clearly decides their future anyway?